At a community college, and I've taught horticulture at a community college for 14 years now this year. I hate to admit it. I've been in the industry for 25 years since I got out of college. I'm a pest control advisor, and I have all but one of the categories on my license for pest control advising. A little bit about my background is I've worked as a pest control advisor actively in the industry for the entirety of the 25 years. I've worked primarily for 4 different companies. So I've got experience with some of your suppliers that may not be John Deere Landscapes, but I do have experience in the industry with products from across the board of all different suppliers. One of the things I tried to do in giving you a presentation today is the same type of presentation that I've given at PAPA meetings, which is the Pesticide Applicators Professional Association, and that is that it's a non-denominational presentation. I'm not here trying to push anything or barf out, you should buy this product from us. I invited a guest who's coincidentally here from out of state, from Florida, to come and he's at a trade show, a national trade show is occurring down in Carlsbad. And so he's here, and the trade show is Tuesday and Thursday, and today was their field day from their national convention. And he opted out of taking a bus tour to go to a sod farm so he could come and talk to you as well. So that worked out just coincidentally. I live in Riverside. I was born and raised in Riverside, and if you don't mind me telling you this as an introduction, I was raised in a medical family, and I'm the guy that became the plant doctor. I didn't want to become a medical doctor. I'm surrounded by nurses and physicians in my family. I love what I do, it's my passion. I was kicked in the rump to go start teaching. A couple of you smiled when I said that, but I was kicked in the rump to go start teaching by Dr. Kent Kurtz. Dr. Kent Kurtz was the 37-year turfgrass professor from Cal Poly Pomona, and I took classes from Dr. Kurtz, and Dr. Kurtz implored us that those to whom much is given, much is expected. And he identified one community college, this is the Mount San Jacinto Community College, and the college district is one of the fastest growing in Southern California. So we're north of San Diego County. Our college district starts around Temecula, goes all the way up near Corona, just south of Riverside, and all the way out to Banning and Beaumont, and then loops around and captures Hemet in this other area. There was no horticulture being taught at that school. So believe it or not, about now 16 years ago, we started the process through the Office of Education to begin a horticulture program at that college. Many people are familiar with the horticulture programs that are in San Diego, Orange County, or up at Mount Sac near Cal Poly in LA County. Some of you might have attended those programs. We didn't have a horticulture program at all in this district. So I'm privileged to be here to speak to you today because I have quite a bit of public speaking experience, and I've been invited repeatedly because I have a non-denominational presentation. So what I'm here to talk about is education and not just throwing products at you left and right. I'm going to show you some pretty cool stuff. And it's not just about turf grass management. We can talk a little bit about weed control and planters and plant materials too. So first, what is properly managed turf grass? The turf species must be adapted to its environment. And we have an oddity here. I have a new boss that is the head honcho of our division for Southern California. And although he was born and raised in Southern California, he was back on the East Coast for many, many years. And he came back, and even though he used to work for Rainbird in Southern California, it's a little new to him to come back and to try to explain to him how does kikuyu grass differ from Bermuda grass? And what is kikuyu grass, and what are some of its traits? And I'm going to talk quite a bit about kikuyu grass because I'll bet most of us have some area of responsibility in this room where we have kikuyu grass. It's either a desirable grass we're maintaining, it's either intermixed with fescue if it's a cool season area because it spreads like a warm season grass. But more importantly, now we have many, many properties that have opted to transition from Bermuda that was overseeded with cool season grasses, and they're transitioning into maintaining kikuyu grass on a regular basis. Not everybody knows that Torrey Pines and Riviera Country Club and quite a few other very high-end televised locations are all kikuyu grass wall to wall. And that's usually a shock to everybody. And what is properly managed turf grass is one of my favorite pictures because of this reason. And you guys all know this. If you haven't done this yourself, you've had somebody who works for you who has had this issue. You can have someone that works for you, or you may have done this where you've poured your heart into something and you've really given it your best. But the tools that you were given and the instruction that you were given, and you spent extra time, you went over and above the call of duty, You did everything that should have turned out right, but it didn't turn out just the way you wanted. It didn't come out perfect. And we're not striving for perfection. We're trying to get going along here with progress. But this is an example of someone who used a drop spreader, didn't use a crossing pattern, and it didn't work out so well. So I'm going to talk a lot for the next few minutes about this idea, and I'll tell you a little bit about how this came about. I have trained college students who have left the college where I teach now for 14 years, and I've had people have an opportunity to get jobs elsewhere. I had one that just happened I'm kind of excited about. We had a guy named Cameron Chilcote who went through the college program where I teach, and he was working at University of Redlands, and he was on the sports field grounds crew, and he just got the job as the head sports field guy for San Jose State University. And those little success stories like that, one after another, that make teaching one of the most rewarding things that I do. And it's not just here at work at John Deere. Yes, I'm a sales guy. Yes, I've been a sales manager and helped other people in their careers. But what's more important is trying to help everybody do a better job and figure out kind of what is the lay of the land and where they work. I have a really fun story. I have a former student who's now in Shenzhen, China, managing a golf course for one of the richest men in the world. He's been involved with building a golf course in the Maldives, which is an island off of like the Indian Ocean, the coast of India in the Indian Ocean. And he's also been involved with helping to build a golf course in Mongolia. Just for fun, he said that Mongolia is so corrupt that if you send a container full of seed to Mongolia, and these are improved varieties with endophytes, that when they steal half the container of seed and they use it to go replant the fields where they graze their animals, when the animals die because they didn't realize that endophyte turfgrass improved varieties have endophytes in them, and the endophytes, if they're fed to ruminant animals, can kill the animals. So they actually, in Mongolia, they stole half the seed, used it on their pastures and killed some of the animals, but of course they claimed that no one stole the seed. They said they used it all in the golf course under construction, but then local animals started dying because the seed was used to plant the grass, and then when the grass grew, the animals eat the grass, and if you guys know what endophytes are, there's endophytes in improved turf varieties, and so to loop that around again, gee, why are the animals dying? We didn't steal your seed. Okay, you guys can lighten up. Okay, the growth curves are very, very important for two reasons. I've even done growth curves for Australia. I was privileged in 2007 to go down and give a talk in Australia, and I did growth curves for Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And it was quite interesting to go down there because the curves are more or less upside down because of the seasons. It's the same growth curves if you cut the chart in half in the middle and pasted the ends together opposite. So in other words, you know, it's Christmas for us is cold, Christmas for them is swimming weather. Let's talk about this for just a second, and I want to focus on this one. I use this to teach advanced turf management at the community college. And in fact, I give the students 10 of these curves and without anything written on them, and they're supposed to do what would be like a graphic artist's mapping on 10 different of these, and they have to do 10 points on each curve, and there's different curves. So I'm going to show you some different ones up on the screen, but I'm just going to give you an idea. And then we have these for the students, because we have the students then come up and hold different curves, and they don't know which curve they're going to get. So you're going to have to stand in front of the audience. So just imagine if it was one of you, and I came out in the audience and I said, this is your curve, stand up and talk to the audience about how you're going to do your timing for your curve. So, I mean, you could probably do it if it was where you work, but it gets really hard to identify and do it for someone's curve when it's not where you're familiar with. So if I gave you one for Shenzhen, China, or I gave you one for Melbourne, Australia, you really have to put your thinking cap on for a minute. What's interesting for me is I work for a company that's been centered out of the East Coast, and we have how many, anybody want to take a guess? How many growth curves do you think we have in Ohio? Major turf grass, major horticulture growing zones. Anybody want to poke a guess at that? 10. How many? 10? Well, that's intuitive if you realize how many there are in California. So I'll sneak the one out for California. In California, there's 23 growth curves, or growing zones, identified like in the Sunset Western Zone book, you know, the Sunset Western Garden book. And of those 23, we kind of grow turf grass commercially really in 18 of the 23 zones. So that's a lot. Anybody else want to guess about Ohio though? Ohio has 3 zones. So if you're a manager, you work for our company and you're one of the head guys and you come from back east, you think, well, why does California have so many different things? Why do they need so many different products? Why is it that you guys from Newport Beach might need something different than some guy who comes from Cal Poly Pomona? You know, is it really that different? Because to a guy back east, it looks like it's pretty close on a map. But it's a real big difference if you live here. And we know that. Ohio has 3 zones. Ohio has kind of that lake effect zone. That's the around the Lake Erie, northern part of Ohio. It's kind of got the central part of Ohio zone. And then down in the southern part of Ohio, there's some hills, rolling hills that get down more into the Kentucky Hills area, and West Virginia, Kentucky in that zone. And the reason why that's important is because there's only 3 zones in Ohio, if you think about the products that you need, or you think about, for instance, the variety of how you're going to grow grass, when you're going to see broadleaf weeds start to germinate, it's a huge difference compared to California. So let's talk about this zone that's on the screen. Warm season turf, believe it or not, in Cathedral City, it's so hot down there in the middle of the summer, there's actually a dip in the growth curve at the top. That little dip in the middle of the summer is actually excessive heat even for Bermuda grass. It's so absolutely hot down there that even Bermuda is overheating if it doesn't get adequate irrigation. On the other extreme, cool season grass in that zone is almost impossible to keep alive unless you have a hardy variety, it's in the shade, it gets plenty of water. If you have cool season grass that's out in full sun, with any other conditions, it's almost impossible to keep cool season grass alive down there. That's what this growth curve shows. That there's only a very small percentage of grass that will even survive in that weather pattern. Let's talk about a couple things these charts show us. If you were to overseed, or you wanted to interseed, you can tell from these charts, this is the same thing we teach to advanced turf management students. You can tell from these charts in the fall about when you'd want to overseed. You'd want to overseed to give yourself enough time so that the cool season grass can go through 3 stages of growth and development. And it's called gem, just like a gemstone you'd have if you have a wedding ring. Anybody out there, when you have a diamond in your ring, it's a gem. It's germination, establishment, and maturity. Germination, establishment, maturity. Germination can take 4 days to a week or 10 days, depending on irrigation, like for ryegrass, but establishment can take more than a month. If you look at this same curve for the Las Vegas area managers overseed at the end of September. I'm sorry, at the end of August and the beginning of September around Labor Day. I said that wrong. It's the end of August. You've got guys literally in severe heat in Las Vegas. And the reason is they have to have enough time here in September, October, because in Las Vegas it's so much colder than in our low desert. They have to start earlier or they can't get the grass to maturity, which is the M. The establishment phase takes a certain period of time, 45, 60 days, even with great fertility. Under college level NTEP studies, that's National Turf Grass Evaluation Program studies, low desert NTEPs, they give ryegrass that's planted in October, between October and January, they give it 2+ pounds of nitrogen. In 2.5 months, on the most recent overseeing study, they gave it 2.17 pounds of nitrogen in just 2.5 months. Most of us in our positions probably either don't overseed at the right time, don't give it the right amount of irrigation, or we don't give it enough fertility. We're under managing it and expecting a better result. And this is proved out not just in the growth curves, but also when you look at what the university has done in terms of trying to compare varieties. The standardized format for them in this climate zone is to overseed in October as the Bermuda grass declines in growth, as the cool season grass accelerates, and even in the low desert, you're still not going to get much below 50% growth on cool season grass, even in the winter. Well, that's a big difference compared to some other areas. One more thing before I move on to this. I'm going to show you in just a second this Oxnard, Ventura, and show you how close that is to Anaheim. which is why I was joking right before the meeting. I put Anaheim, I added Anaheim on here. But let's go back to this one. And by the way, I've been asked to do these growth curves for Pittsburgh and some place in Alabama, Gadsden, Alabama, a place I've never been. I've had people send in requests to see if we can try to put together curves for other areas. In the spring, we have what's called if you overseed. Now, if you don't overseed, this might seem a little bit not pertinent to you. But so if you're kind of a newcomer at this, please bear with me for a minute because it will seem more important when you see your slide for your area. In the spring, we have what's called this insidious problem, especially when we overseed grasses, and it's this crunch right here where we go through what's called transition. And so many of you may be familiar with transition, but transition is nothing more than that time period when the cool season grass is taking a dive and the warm season grass is trying to come back. Okay, in some of our climate zones, one of the reasons why this is worth discussing, it's easy to see transition in that curve. In our climate zones, especially in the San Fernando Valley and some of the inland valleys that are away from the coastline, we can have transitions that are pretty bad. And one of the reasons we have a bad transition is we need to keep a rule of thumb in mind. If you're overseeding Bermuda grass someplace, like say you have a sports field, you still need to give that Bermuda grass like 100 days of optimum growth without overseed competition for that Bermuda to return and have a dense stand and to get full coverage and to store carbohydrates before we start the cycle again of overseeding. So you can see here that we don't have any problem in the low desert giving Bermuda grass 100 days of active growth. Just let me make sure it's not my mom calling. Hold on one second. Hey Tony, I'm in front of an audience. Can I call you back? Tony, I'm in front of an audience. I got to call you back. That's my new boss. So even if it wasn't my mom, if it's my new boss, I'm going to answer the phone. You guys laugh, but many of you have been there. In the springtime, if you are not giving enough window of opportunity of growth, so here you have Bermuda grass is going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 months. That's a long time. It's going to reestablish and have a dense turf. So let me tell you guys a little story. It's not reflected in this curve. It's going to be similar to this next curve. At the Del Mar horse race track, the Del Mar horse race track just rebuilt the track. They're right on the coast. You guys have probably seen it. You can stand up in the clubhouse and look and see the people playing on the beach and walking their dogs, and you can see the waves breaking. I mean, the Del Mar horse race track is right on the ocean, literally. And yet, we chose Bermuda grass after a very extensive study and trials between different grasses. We chose Bermuda grass to go right into that climate zone, which is very similar to what you'd have for Newport Beach. Not a whole lot of difference. But where is kikuyu grass? All right? Kikuyu grass, statistically, is going to be approximately at the midpoint between these two lines, which is a substantial variance compared to what it shows for warm season grasses in the red line at the bottom of the curve. Kikuyu grass is going to approximately start at 20% even in the winter, and in some cases never go dormant, never go off color unless you have a few days of severe frost. And kikuyu grass is going to climb right up in between these two charts and probably be well up into 60 or 70% growth, and then decline right back over to 20 or 25% in the fall, in Christmas time. The reason why this is important is cool season grass spreads like Bermuda, will climb over and shade out cool season grasses. It will always outgrow, in our coastal climate zones, Bermuda grasses. It will continually outgrow Bermuda grasses. There's kind of one exception. So what Del Mar chose to do is Del Mar chose the variety of grass that was bred over in Australia. For that Australian Mediterranean climate, coastal cool climate zone that's in Australia, where kikuyu grass is prolific. And it's the Greg Norman variety. I don't sell Bermuda grass, I'm just telling you that the GN1 variety is much more active than what the red growth curve indicates on this chart. GN1 was bred for cool weather activity. In fact, GN1 is a variety that's been put in the Gulf states in sports fields down in the Gulf Coast. They say it's no better than common Bermuda and it does not act like a hybrid. They're disappointed with it. In our cool weather climate zones, GN1 actually exceeds the growth curve indicated here. GN1 is growing substantially above this indicated red line for Newport Beach or other areas. So one of the reasons why you'll see such a prolific spread of kikuyu grass is also one of the reasons behind the breeding of Bermuda grass to have a greater cool weather growth pattern. Believe it or not, we've done the same thing with ryegrasses. Ryegrasses that are designed and bred for overseeding warm season grass in the winter that have to go through this climate zone here, those ryegrasses perform better if they're bred for cool weather growth. In other words, they just grow. In the winter, they grow better than what's indicated on there. They may continue to grow up near 80, 90, or 100% in cold weather. So GN1, the breeding of Bermuda grass, has brought about added growth. Cool overseeding ryegrasses have done the same thing. So let's move on and talk about why is there a difference. This goes back to when we had a heat wave. In 2006, California suffered a massive heat wave, and in fact, many workers that work in agriculture, construction, and outdoors, we had people dying in the middle of the summer. And that forever changed our rules in terms of heat-related illness and heat-related illness training for Cal OSHA. You may also notice now that agricultural workers now have to have special precautions, protections, shade for breaks and lunches, and the contractors that are working in ag areas throughout California, especially in the low desert, have to bring extra amounts of water and provide during time periods of excessive heat, additional areas for shade or rest for those workers. There was something like 30-some workers that died during this heat wave. But what's important to show you is the red line that's indicated on the chart is at about 77 degrees. And at 77 degrees near the surface, cool season grasses stop producing carbohydrates and stop adding roots. One of the tricks for this growth curve, though, that I've shown you these different growth curves is, this is CIMMYS weather station data from all over California, and in places that you might think would have different levels of soil temperatures, they're really not that far apart after all. Now here's why. What do you think, and this is a question for the audience, and Jim, you cannot answer in the back. Okay, what do you all think is the #1 driving factor for soil temperatures? Concrete. I'm thinking of in a vegetative setting. Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. In fact, that's why we see goosegrass and crabgrass pop first around sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and bunkers, like on a golf course around the sand traps. Hey, you're exactly right. It's very intuitive. But what my question is referring to, what is one of the main drivers of soil temperatures?
Soil density.
Yeah, you're also right. It would also have to do with irrigation, the temperature of irrigation water, whether you got rainfall and those things. But soil temperatures are driven by Langley units of solar radiational heating, infrared and Langley units of heating. So I'm sorry if that came out like a mouthful of rocks, but here's the thing. So Long Beach and Riverside don't have a big difference between soil temperatures as long as Long Beach has clear weather conditions. Say it again, those of you from Newport Beach. When you have overcast, drizzly weather, you don't have the same thermal soil temperature heating that you have if it's bright and sunny. It's intuitive, right? It's intuitive that it's the Langley radiational units that are driving soil temperatures. Having said that, overcast days can cause some pretty amazing things, and they can change the growth curve because overcast days will tend to keep soil temperatures lagging behind, and then all of a sudden we get rid of the May gray, we get rid of the June gloom, and what do we get? Growth that goes crazy. And you can take kikuyu grass on your growth curve and then get rid of the overcast conditions, and kikuyu grass could already be up around 80% growth right when the June gloom is dissipating, right before you get to 4th of July. Right about then, if you fertilize and everything seemed to be going great, guess what can happen? Especially on kikuyu grass. It can go crazy. And you can be on cool season turf on a sports field, you can be on cool season turf on a golf course, and you can have the grass immediately begin to suffer because you have very long daylight hours. That's the other thing about soil temperatures is related to day length. So you have the long day length, the longest days of the year around what? The 21st, 22nd of June, longest day of the year, right? Summer solstice. And right after that, you had this heat wave in 2006. And even though we spiked soil temperatures, it's important, I want everybody to note that soil temperatures don't vary that crazily. We didn't put the low desert in here because it would be an unfair spike way up around 90 degrees. Low desert soil temperatures on that chart would be an unfair comparison. So we left it off. Is that fair? It's amazing how close those were. Okay, now if I haven't confused you yet, if you're bored, sit still, stay seated, keep your hands and feet inside the ride at all times, especially for Marcy. Okay. If we took the afternoon high temperature average for San Diego, remember I said Del Mar chose Bermuda grass to redo the whole entire horse race track. They're right on the ocean. If you just look at the growth curve, you don't think about anything past that, you see that just doesn't seem right. Even if you took GN1, even everything you're telling me, but we need the base to hold together for strength so the horses can run on it, 5,000 pounds per square inch each impact. Boom. If we can keep a complete turf surface at a horse race track through racing of multiple horses every day, we do it by moving the railing position, maintaining fertility, and knowing what we're doing with the growth curves. And if we can do it there, you can do it where those soccer goalposts are. You can figure out a way to do the sidelines in the football field. We have the answers. It's just difficult sometimes to figure out the solution. Sometimes you need someone else to look in from the outside. With this growth curve, this is the afternoon high temperature average for warm season growth, and this curvature that occurs right over here is often related to that overcast, statistical pattern of overcast conditions. So you'll see a break in the curve. But that shows for warm season grass about 70% potential, and we know that GN1 is substantially above that. So even in Del Mar, we know that GN1 in the afternoon heat in the summer, we knew that we could get GN1 to get up around 80% growth potential. That's based on high temperature average. Now, what happens if we look at the low temperature? In other words, we took the turf grass potential to grow and we crossed it against the daily high temperature average. I don't need the PA system, thank you for asking. That was supposed to be fun. He's closing the door so he can get his own work done. 2 blocks away. If you take the low temperature average, this is not the average temperature, daily average. When we make these charts, we take a 30-year average, daily average temperature for 30 years. We run the chart on a 30-year daily average and come up with these growth curves. So they're somewhat accurate. This is if we took the daily low temperature average, even at the worst case scenario, if GN1 as a variety, even if you had cool overcast weather in the summertime, we believe that we could maintain about 40% growth in the summer when Del Mar runs its primary meet. It starts after the 4th of July, sometime in the middle of July, and it runs until Labor Day, and they're running on Bermuda grass. So we even looked at the worst case scenario, and here it is, the San Diego low temperatures. We figured even if the worst case scenario was we'd still have 40% growth, and if we fertilize, maybe we can push it a little bit more aggressively. Okay, Santa Barbara, here's the San Diego daytime low, here's the San Diego high. They look pretty close to Newport Beach and Oxnard Ventura for the averages. Let's pop down here and look at Santa Barbara. Not a lot of difference. So in these coastal climate zones, when you see the Sunset Western Garden Book and you look at the growth zones in Sunset Western Garden Book, it matches what we get when we run the data. Okay, here's a little change. Let's say that you're out in the Hemet area. Let's say that you're in Ukaiba or Redlands. Let's say that you're in Banning or Beaumont. Let's say that you might even be up in the high desert in like Apple Valley. Let's take some other climate zones, maybe even near Magic Mountain, let's say. But you take some intercoastal mountain areas and that you have mid-elevations. What does that mean? Probably around 2,000 feet up to maybe 3,500 feet elevation, maybe 1,700 feet. You know, say Hemet's a little bit lower than 2,000. But this is your growth curve for cool and warm season grasses. You're farther from the coast. You don't have the same intercoastal ocean influence. And this is a driving factor in deciding, because here's a problem. Remember I said about Bermuda grass needs 100 days of growth without competition from overseeding. If you want to overseed, you got to figure out when to overseed to give enough time for the overseed grass to get established before it gets cold. Let's work it backwards. If I wanted to overseed here, I better overseed quick enough to give like 2 months. I need to be overseeding in early September. Oak Valley Golf Club in Beaumont overseeds in early September. He just has enough chance to grow the cool season grass in before it gets too cold to grow it in anymore, and he still has problems getting to maturity on ryegrass. Watch this. On the far side, in the springtime, it doesn't get hot enough in Beaumont early enough. He has trouble with transition. The cool season grass wants to hang on all the way till June. If we let that happen, we don't end up with 100 days of growth on the Bermuda grass without competition. You see how easy that was? We want to run through it again. We got to give the overseed grass enough time to get established before it gets cold on this end. When the cool season grass is coming out on this end, this could be your sports fields, guys. Then you need enough time for the Bermuda to grow in. And by the way, this isn't at 100% growth, so maybe it needs more than 100 days. Maybe it needs 110 days because it's not up to all the way at 100% for growth. This is how simple this is, guys. Let's do another one. How about an inland valley? Let's take Calpod, Pomona, Riverside, San Gabriel Valley. I would say even Anaheim and some of these lower valleys here that are a little bit farther away from the coast. Wow, kikuyu grass is above the red line, probably 20% above the red line. So kikuyu grass is going to start at 20, it's going to end up above 80, and it's going to come back down to 20. Kikuyu grass is going to go right in between those two curves and stay above in the middle because it's a warm season grass that grows in cooler climatology. That means some of you in this room are managing places that have kikuyu grass, and we have a statistical predictive model that if you fertilize with the wrong fertilizer at the wrong time, you're going to blow the kikuyu grass out of the ground and you're going to have more grass to mow than you want to mow. And we can also show that to you for tall fescue as well. If you're on sports fields, we can help guide you. This is that simple. And I give growth curves to anybody who wants them. I can email them to you. They're free of charge. How about TPC Valencia? TPC Valencia, Magic Mountain area, has a unique characteristic that they have fairly good overcast weather conditions, and somehow right in that valley, in the Santa Clarita Valley, the overcast weather condition just ends. Literally, they don't get May, Gray, and June gloom at Magic Mountain. One of the reasons why it was chosen to be put where it was in the first place, by the people who built it. At Magic Mountain, they are a couple layers of mountains away from the ocean. If you understand, first the cloud cover has to get over those hills near the coast and get over into the San Fernando Valley, and then it's usually blocked from going all the way up because it would have to go through that pass where the 5 freeway is. You know, like where the bridge closed when the earthquake hit? There's a couple people in the room that are probably too young to remember that. That's embarrassing. Okay, well anyway, but that overcast condition ends fairly abruptly right in the month of April, and bam, they are full sun every day. Even though the air temperatures are not a whole lot different, they don't have the overcast conditions. And if you go just over the valley, or just over the mountains to the San Fernando Valley, or go over the mountains to the Simi Valley, it's a completely different growth curve slightly, and that's because they still have overcast weather conditions. Back to Cathedral City, I beat that up like a dead horse. That was a Del Mar joke for anybody that likes to bet on the pony. Okay. So what is properly managed turf? We can talk about having drainage, non-compacted. So those of you that have sports fields, we have to be aggressive with trying to work on fighting compaction. We have indicator weeds. I'm going to flash through a couple of these real quick. Indicator weeds. So some things like high soil pH, we see in our area a lot of broadleaf plantain. One of the ones that's very common in our droughty soils is prostrate knotweed, very common. In wet areas, we can get especially yellow nutsedge, all right? Believe it or not, in the low desert, we can see prostrate knotweed because there's also nematodes in certain areas. We have certain things, chickweed and pineapple weed that do really well with low mowing heights. And we get a lot of clover in low nitrogen areas. And I'm going to show you some pictures that are just amazing in a minute. And hopefully try to keep this fun and on time for Jim. How about this one? Again, compacted soil, prostrate knotweed keeps showing up in our indicators. Now we can grow weeds in areas like this, and this is kind of some amazing things. You know, Mother Nature wants to put plant material where there's not competition. Mother Nature is working to put something there. So one of the best ways to prevent weed problems in turf is to properly manage the grass. Actually, if you look at the third bullet down, if you look up the UC IPM page on crabgrass on the web from the University of California, the IPM webpage says the #1 thing you can do to fight crabgrass is to increase fertility and improve turf density and repair damaged areas. Okay, the quickest way to prevent weed problems is to apply herbicides, but herbicides are really only short-term solutions. So I'm sitting up here, I'm a PCA, and I sell herbicides all day long, but the bottom line is I think more folks can do better with properly timed fertility. Not just more fertility, just properly timed fertility is probably the best thing to help prevent some weeds. Now, how about compaction? At the end of a cart path, there's a line or a row of weeds on the right-hand side. You can see the traffic pattern. There's a couple pictures like this in here. Traffic pattern and those weeds on the right, as you get up close to them, are goosegrass. Because the goosegrass is prolific in this high traffic area. On the right-hand side, you can see each little clump of goosegrass. And my shoe. Okay. Broadleaf plantain doesn't look like it looks in a textbook, but it's super easy to control. And I hate to tell you this, we sell these aerosol cans of like Trimec in an aerosol can, and it sprays upside down with a little pin stream of a broadleaf weed foam. And that is the best method. If you have that much leaf surface area to aim at, even just a spot spray with a broadleaf weed can is a great method to attack that. Now, how about this one? In areas where you have different irrigation coverages, now this is an irrigation quiz backwards, you'll have different weeds that show up in different areas of irrigation. Obviously, you've all seen this. So here you have in the front, in the foreground, you have crabgrass. It has to be the right time of year. So down here we got crabgrass coming in, and you've also got kikuyu grass in the picture. I think it's easier to see on the computer screen over here than it is up there. But you've got some kikuyu grass right in the middle and crabgrass, and both are coming into a Bermuda grass area. And that's kikuyu grass on the left and crabgrass in the middle. You can see the kikuyu over there on the left-hand side and crabgrass right in the middle. And clover. Clover's a tough one for lots of us, but this is a good picture of clover hiding in low-mowed turf. You can even see some of the increased greening on the turf grass. And that's what it looks like if you're not paying attention. Clover's already getting started before people realize it. That's what another clump of clover looks like in higher mowed turf. All right. How about shady areas? Broadleaf weeds are prevalent in shady areas. You take some of our places and parks especially, we may spray around tree wells with, say, Roundup or something else. And then in the rest of the winter, because of our growth curve, we don't have any warm season grass reoccupying those areas. We haven't seeded those areas, so there's no recovery that way. And what does Mother Nature do? Voila. Okay, dandelions are prominent. I've seen a lot of dandelions this year, especially. These pictures were from, that's kikuyu grass in hybrid Bermuda. The kikuyu grass is always going to outgrow the hybrid Bermuda. Once it gets started, the growth curve indicates that in our climate zone, the Bermuda cannot outcompete the kikuyu. And with cool season grass, the kikuyu, because it spreads, will smother and cover cool season grasses. Again, broadleaf plantain coming into a thin area with multiple grass varieties there. That's actually goosegrass popping. Anybody know what that is? Anybody? Quiz 101?
Smut.
What's that?
Smut.
Very good. Cheers to the guy in the back corner. Now, it could usually be funny. Well, here's the thing. We call it, it's wiregrass or smut grass. Very good. And it doesn't mow. So what happens is if you're using real mowers, it will push over a little bit like those stalks, the seed stalks on Dallas grass. And you'll see that this will, I mean, the whole fairway's been mowed and that's sticking out like a sore thumb. This is a prevalent spreading grass. It's showing up in more places. I first started seeing it about 10 years ago along the coastal areas like Los Verdes, Palos Verdes Peninsula, Hermosa Beach, Redondo, those areas. It's spread prolifically. It's amazing. I'll tell you what someone who's not from our industry said, the best method of control is not to spray this weed with glyphosate. The best method of control is to put the nozzle of the sprayer right to the crown of that plant and pull the trigger one time. Just like you pull the trigger on a gun. If you spray, you'll kill a big patch of turf and leave a dead spot. But if you put the nozzle right to the crown and pull the trigger one time, you can kill this with glyphosate, and you don't have to leave a great big crater in the middle of the turf that's a dead patch of grass. In many areas, in many parks, in many golf courses, in many settings, including landscapes, we get Poa annua that grows in the cool, wet winter months. Well, wait, did I say wet? Oh, we're in a drought. Never mind. Okay, but we get Poa that grows in the winter. As soon as the trees start to pick up and they pick out moisture out of the ground, and the Poa now starts to suffer from competition from trees for moisture, it also gets disease. This is a very shady area, and it was annual bluegrass Poa annua that was growing in that zone. Okay, a fun story. Went to a park. It's in Apple Valley. I was called. They said, hey, we rebuilt this park. We have fertilized it like you cannot believe. We cannot get the grass to respond. Went out to the park. I see clover with green grass in the clover, and I see fairy rings with green grass in the fairy rings, and I get to looking, and at the end of my knee are the grass blades from the areas where there is not fairy ring or clover, and it's the same variety of grasses, and the grass blades up on my nice thin thigh. Thanks for laughing, Marcy. Those grass blades are the same plant in the same climate zone that have the fertility that's coming from either the fairy ring releasing nutrients or from the clover adding nitrogen, because it's a legume. And we had this problem that the contractor did not properly rototill the field. They put mulch on top of the field, and the contract called for the contractor to rototill the mulch in, and we had a solid clay layer on the bottom and a bunch of organic on top. So the first rounds of fertility were either getting tied up in the organic matter or the clay or both, and I even broke a tube trying to put a tube in the ground because it was so hard down below. What had happened to the contractor, the ground was so hard, the contractor went out and tried to rototill it, and I think the guy just gave up and just mulched the top and put the grass on top of the mulch. So you had two problems. If you over-irrigate the field, it doesn't drain because it's clay underneath. If you don't irrigate enough, the field dries out because the organic that was on the top just dries out like if you mulched a flower bed. So back up. We had a problem with the soil profile, and it was super hard at the bottom. We didn't have drainage. So if they started irrigating and got in wet spots, they just turned the irrigation on. But then what happened is other areas would dry up, and so you go back to look at the whole field, and we had a fairly even install, but they had already put out 2 pounds of nitrogen by then. We showed them the growth curve, where they were at in the growth curve. We showed them that we had stuff tied up in either the organic matter, which causes what's called denitrification, and then we also had this clay problem at the bottom, and the compound effect caused other problems. When we let the grass keep going toward the 4th of July, based on the growth curve, we also put a foliar application of nitrogen in that field, and that field that I just showed you a second ago was absolutely beautiful. They opened for the 4th of July weekend a few years ago, and everything worked out fine. They were nervous because it was cold enough in the high desert, and the growth curve had only a small percentage. They not only had the grass coming low on the growth curve, the fertility was tied up. And once we got fertility and the growth curve going together, they had a great field for the 4th of July. Okay, let's talk about compaction. This is a favorite picture of mine to show compaction and traffic damage. You know, we have to manage and move compaction around. You can aerify to alleviate compaction, but one of the best proofs about compaction is people in golf carts don't want to spill their beer. Let's be frank. And they're not going to drive over the valve cover boxes. So guess what you get? That's the turf grass without traffic surrounded by the turf grass with traffic. If you don't think traffic needs more fertility, if you're not fertilizing double for that grass to put up with that extra traffic, if you're running a sports field and you haven't doubled your fertility, you are unthinking the problem. The fertility has to double to overcome that much traffic. And in fact, it's so obvious, you can see the traffic pattern damage from the air. You can see it in multiple places. You can see the traffic pattern damage over here, behind this green, right in this area. You can see it coming off the T over there. There's carts at the bottom, and right where the cart path ends, it's a scatter pattern. And look at the grass in the rough and on the T and all kinds of areas. And even up around the green, the cart path traffic congests to the left of the bunker. You can see where the cart is up there at the green on the left, and you have severe traffic pattern damage in those areas. You don't have to fertilize that whole entire thing at a double rate, but those areas with the most severe traffic pattern damage need more fertility. And they may need more fertility in potassium. Sometimes we give it enough nitrogen, but we don't give it enough potassium. So let's talk about a worst case scenario. I'm running right now about 7 minutes behind schedule. Okay, just Jim, so you know. I'm watching the clock, I know where I'm at. Okay. Wow. I think this would be a tool that will help me explain. This is the school district. The school district has a growth pattern, something like this. They waited to fertilize till the kids got out of school. Unfortunately, there were people that last year wanted to take the 4th of July week off. So we put out an all available nitrogen as the growth curve reached a pretty high point in the growth curve potential for growth, if you're with me. We didn't put out a slow release, we put out an all available. You guys remember 4th of July last year? It was during the week, right? So we had people on short work week, we had people that took time off, and once the grass started growing prolifically, guess what happened to the efficiency of the mow crew? It took longer to mow the same acreage because of the excessive clippings, and it's harder on the equipment. So not only did the proficiency of your employees slow down because the grass was growing so fast anyway, but then you had a holiday and people taking time off, and the combination meant that the weeks after the 4th of July were even worse for the people to catch up on their mowing. Now this is preventable on a few different levels. So if you follow me here, here's how it played out. This entire field had such excessive clippings that they had to turn the water off to dry the place down to get caught back up on the mowing. And when they did that, they had such excessive clippings, they had to then come in and vacuum the field and bring in a dumpster to pick up the excessive clippings. And just to show this to you, and if I could have Jim, maybe you would help me do some handouts up here. We're going to do a little work package of stuff. We can take half and hand these down. Would you send half that way? A couple that way. Some of these you got. You take So at Mount Sac years ago, the front page that you're looking at, this is not around the room yet. All I'm trying to show with the front picture is from every angle, from every single angle, the grass is just as green from every angle. There's no difference in the green up in every angle. This was at a PAPA meeting. This was a hands-on demonstration at a Pesticide Applicators Professional Association meeting, and the meeting was on October 19th, and that date will be very important to you in just 1 minute, so don't forget. I did a September application for an October 19th PAPA meeting at Mount Sac Community College. That's the bomb. Because I looked at that when I was invited, and I looked at the growth curves, and I said, woohoo, October 19th is going to put me right, I'm still in the peak for the growth curve. If I go in September and do the fertilizer application and set it up so it's almost a month later for the growth, I will have a meeting that's perfect because I'm reverse engineering the growth curve for a demonstration for an October 19th meeting that was planned well ahead by the Pesticide Applicators Association. So I went out, and from every single angle, it's just as green. And if you turn the page, at the end of our event, everybody could come out and see the clipping yield. It's hard for me to show you the clipping yield, so the next day we went out, that afternoon, I'm sorry, you'll see some shadows in the picture, they're from the trees. We mowed out 16.68 all available nitrogen. We mowed out 50% slow release. We mowed out a 70% slow release, and we mowed out all the plots were the same size. Every one of those plots had the same amount of nitrogen applied, and this was the clippings from 90% slow release. Remember, we were reverse engineering it to get the peak of the growth curve and 90% clippings. The picture I showed you a minute ago of the school district school that had to bring in the dumpster and vacuum the clippings, they had the same effect as if you'd put down all the available 16.68 at that time. And what happened to them was they had the perfect storm because the 4th of July was in the middle of the week. People took time off. The mow crews were already getting bogged down. And by then, after the 4th of July, they could not get caught up. They ended up having to turn irrigation off and trying to mow stuff down. It was a nightmare. And this is the same story here. It would be the same basic growth curve just in the fall instead of the spring. The picture I showed you before the school district was taken on July 19th of last year. In this case, if they put, when the kids got out of school, if they put out a 90% slow release, they'd have fed the grass over the entire summer and had almost no clippings for the mow crews to mow and no dumpsters to dump and no vacuum to do. And the people could have taken their holiday 4th of July time off. There'd been no problem. That simple. Captured in a couple of simple pictures. The next page in your chart is this nitrification chart. It shows the conversion of nitrogen to the nitrate available form based on soil temperatures. At 75 degrees, all of this, all available nitrogen, remember I put the application out in September. I did it on purpose. I knew the soil temperatures would be around 75 or 80 degrees based on the other thing I showed you earlier that showed Long Beach and all those other places about the same. So 16.68, all available nitrogen, all of that nitrogen became available in the time period between when I did the application and when the event was. And I knew that. I reverse engineered. I did it on purpose. 50% slow release actually surprised me because there wasn't as big a pile. There's cardboard under each of those. It's the same cardboard. I put the cardboard down thinking I'm a smart, lazy guy. I just want to pick up the cardboard and throw the clippings away. That didn't exactly work out too well. Even the 50% gave me more than I wanted based on the timing of when it was applied. 70% was great, especially if I was trying to grow in or handle traffic in an area. 90% would be, in that case, for that timing, 90% seemed to be right. Let's see. The packets are for you to keep. I'm not going to go through. There's some other growth curves in there. Let me keep moving in the interest of time. Adequate potassium. In this picture, nitrogen has been applied at the same rate to both plots. The plot on the right, this is not in your packet, sorry. The plot on the right cannot green up appropriately because there's deficient potassium. In sports fields or cold weather or establishing turf grass you're trying to overseed, the potassium is the second most needed nutrient by the plant. It's the second most needed. Okay, having said that, here you have the same amount of nitrogen applied on the left and the right is not greening up the way you'd like. We started having Mike Ventura with the city of Irvine applying a 33-017 instead of applying a urea. And he has seen this type of results on sports fields for the city of Irvine, just switching from urea to a 33-017. Just making that switch has changed the outcome, dramatically like that. Okay, next. What does potassium do to roots? Potassium produces more roots. If you're in a drought, if you need to turn the water down, if you have an event coming up, if you have sports players that are going to come and you need to have it dry, if you're a golf guy and you have a big tournament over a weekend, it doesn't matter what the issue is. If you have a very hot, dry weekend and nobody out to water or hit hot spots will be more visible, more pronounced, and more devastated when the grass there doesn't have the same root system as grass with more potassium added. So the effect of seeing more brown spots on your turf can be eliminated either because you don't have adequate potassium and you'll see a better green response when it's added, or because you'll have a better root system in the first place because there's more potassium there. At 240 pounds over here on the right-hand side, that's what we would call luxury consumption of potassium. The plant will still continue to use it. Let's talk about self-inflicted damage. This is a wig-waggy pattern. I tried to do a little close-up so you can see this zigzaggy pattern. This is a guy spraying with a hand sprayer around the edge of a green with a rabbit repellent. The rabbit repellent turned a little bit herbicidal on him. It wasn't devastating, but it also showed the terrible spray pattern that was being used by the guy just walking and waving his arm left and right. And sometimes we have that same effect with the guys that work for us that go out and do their best, but we don't show them how to either spot spray or to not excessively spray. Remember with smut grass, I said just put the nozzle right to the crown and only pull the trigger once, just like you shoot a gun. If it's more than that, it's too much, because then you kill a big spot. And I've had guys tell me that that actually works and is very inexpensive, and they can go a very long way with a backpack full of glyphosate when they only pull the trigger like that one time when they're spot spraying a weed right at the crown. Okay, talk about aerification to alleviate compaction. That's a pretty heavy clay soil. We have some pretty bad examples where we need to do aerification with minimal surface disruption, and we've got to get sand in holes. We also have inorganic amendments. I'm not here to promote them, but sand is the #1 inorganic amendment. But we also sell calcined clay and other porous type products, especially in high compaction zones that are used frequently by sports field managers. Turfus is one of the most common names. And we have to aerify this just shows a golf green. But we have to do it, especially in high traffic areas, we have to continually fight compaction. So for this, for some summary notes, for broadleaf weeds, Speed Zone Southern in California, Speed Zone Southern because in gallon-sized bottles, Speed Zone Southern is a non-restricted material. You know, fescue can be, or Bermuda can be removed from fescue, and it's on the label for fusillade, but it's not on the label for home lawns. Commercial turf areas, if you're trying to maintain fescue, you can take Bermuda out with fusillade. You can also use turf lawn, because turf lawn will harm Bermuda and Kikuyu, and is very safe on fescue. So you can also use turf lawn if you're trying to get fescue. So if you're maintaining some nice fescue area in a prominent building, you can, there's some things you can do. How about walk-a-wick? Another thing people forget is there's this hockey stick looking thing that has a foam on the end. You fill it with glyphosate and Roundup at a glyphosate and water at a 50-50 ratio, and you go around and you actually swipe the weeds. You can use it in planters and all different types of places. It's very effective. Some of the grassy weeds dismiss. Revolver for goosegrass and revolver, you have to be careful, but we also have Certainty, Monument, and Sedgehammer. Certainty is the new dog. Certainty is great for sedges. It's incredible for sedges, and it's very, very safe around ornamentals. Over 80 ornamentals were added to the label. When the company Monsanto got rid of Manage and turned it over to Gowan, Gowan renamed it Sedgehammer, and Monsanto went with Certainty as their replacement product. And so Certainty has been coming on strong the last few years. This is just for fun, guys. Bear with me. We have just a couple minutes. You wouldn't go jump in a lake just because someone told you to, maybe 1 out of 100 would, and kind of in the middle of the screen it looks like a lady was going to leapfrog. We were showing the effect of systemic herbicides put in the body of water, and the weeds next to the edge of the water are turning white, and the weeds farther away from the water's edge are not. People who see it are professionals. In this case, we're at University of Redlands. In fact, the guy speaking on the right-hand side with the hat is Cameron Chilcote. That's the guy that went to San Jose State. Del Mar Horse Race Track, well, of course, it's televised every day they run. We take students and people on field trips to golf courses and country clubs as well. You've seen this already. You've seen this already. You guys get up at the crack of dawn. We're proud of you for that. We compare products and their effectiveness, including combinations of different items. Sometimes when you see things, they don't always make sense to you. You sometimes have to look and say, what? That can't be real. But sometimes it's like looking into an eclipse of the sun. You really are better off to let us explain things to you than for you to set up this elaborate contraption. Binoculars with a screen, set up with a mirror to reflect the eclipse of the sun into a box that has a screen in the back of the box, so people can actually see the eclipse of the sun without damaging their eyes. When things work really well, sometimes they're fun to show and take pictures of them. Amazing thing happened when we did some plots in cool season grass in the high desert. We found that turf grass fertilized that had clover in it, the clover didn't flower. The clover spent all of its energy to grow as fast as the turf grass to compete with the grass, and there was clover there, but it didn't flower. And the clover in the background on the far side over on the hill, you can see every green patch where there's clover on that hill, but the clover that's right here at the bottom of the screen is in those fertilized plots, but the clover wouldn't flower. All it could do was try to compete, so it stopped flowering. When things look so prominent, this is out in the low desert, and this is the same picture with a chipping green and a driving range in the back that let us, the country club, Mountain View Country Club, let us use their places there for doing demos. Demos on putting greens here in the Whittier area. We did tall fescue in the background and had kikuyu grass intrusion. You can see that in the background. Just to make fun of somebody who's kind of short, the guy with his arm in the air, I worked with him at John Deere, the equipment dealer, and Nick with his arm in the air, his hand is still lower than the elevation of most of the people in the audience. He's a great guy. My daughter would try to tell you that she's not trying to hide something behind her back. My daughter to this day claims that there's nothing in her hands. Now you look at that and tell me, is there something in her hands? She's holding something in her hands behind her back. We have fun at work. We'll tell whoever wants to listen about agronomics, we'll talk about agronomics. I do it at trade shows. Which one is which? We know only a dummy wouldn't listen. Marcy, I thought you'd really like that one. Oh. Which is which? That's a demo plot with fertility in the park at Mount Sac. It's just micronutrients and fertility in a Heinz 57 plot. We've done demos at the horse racetrack at Del Mar. We don't have to have a big production. This is in a theater at Fresno City College. We can put all this literature up here on the table, and that doesn't mean you guys are going to discover the ones that are important for you to look at. We show these products off one at a time with guys, that's some Valley Crest guys, another guy, cool set of glasses on the left. We did demo plots and pop me's in the low desert where we sprayed strips of different nutrients and fertility in strips or stripes instead of doing squares. And it was amazing. And the hotel there let us go on into the balcony of the presidential suite and take pictures of the plots down in their grass. That was fun. Pop a meeting at Mount Sac. Demo plots on the left, right at the edge of the screen. You can see the corner of demo plots in a little T-ball baseball field. You don't need to light the place on fire to talk about agronomics. We just need to have silly fun showing off. And that's, I'm very proud to be here, and thanks for having me. You don't have to go through all the doggone science, which says the oxygen evolving mechanism of plant photosynthesis in which water replaces electrons driven by light from chlorophyll through the redox action of manganese. There's a quiz at the end of that. So if you like something like that in a liquid that's just a micronutrient liquid mix, I can tell you this story about trying palm fertilizer. At Los County's Country Club up at Buena Park, years ago, we put palm fertilizer around the base of all the palm trees. They were looking kind of chlorotic. We put palm fertilizer around the base of the palm trees. It was kikuyu grass. The whole area was kikuyu grass. We could not get the kikuyu grass outside of those rings at the base of the palm trees. We could not get the kikuyu grass to get as green as we got at the bottom of the palm trees. We ended up fertilizing, but we still could not get those rings around the base of the palm trees to go away. We put palm fertilizer at the base of the trees and realized that palm fertilizer was an awesome turf fertilizer, and we ended up going back on the third try. We went back and spread the whole entire area with palm fertilizer. Palm fertilizer is rich in micronutrients, and it's a combination of micronutrients. You don't have to buy a liquid product and put demo pots out like I've done. You can just use a palm type fertilizer. They're sold by different companies, whether it's the company I work for or anybody that sells the Best palm fertilizer 1358. Both of the palm fertilizers, primarily in this market, are full of micronutrients, and they're a big benefit. So where will you be tomorrow? This is not the end, it's the beginning. I want to thank you. I'm Bill from John Deere. We're going to take a short break, and Jim is going to come in and plug in his audiovisual setup. So you guys want to take a quick 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Thank you. No.